Hi, my name is Kirk Hamilton, your host of the Staying Healthy Today show. This is a show where we bring you key experts in the fields of nutrition, prevention, integrative, and lifestyle medicine. We sometimes do that with an interview like we're going to do today, or myself chatting. And the topic today it caught my eye, and I'll tell you why in a moment here. It's intergenerational day centers, a new wave in adult and childcare. And my guest today is Dr. Neda Norouzi. She is a PhD, and she is at the School of Architecture and Planning at the University of Texas at San Antonio, Texas. And she wrote an article with her colleagues. It was a study, Intergenerational Daycare Centers, a New Wave in Adult and Child Care, in the International Journal of Environmental Research, Public Health in 2023. And it caught my eye because I study aging. I help people trying to age gracefully, and I'm trying to age gracefully myself. And I've also, read about healthy aging cultures where they have young children around the elderly. And so my first idea was, oh, she's going to have some interesting information about the synergy of that relationship and maybe as far as a health aspect. And then as I was reading through your article, you also deal with the structure, how to create this in a regular city environment. So, well, I guess we'll have both of those things. So welcome, Dr. Abruzzi. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to speak with you.
So tell me a little bit about your educational background and how you got to where you are today.
That's a long story, but I'll cut it short. I was born in Iran, and I was there until I graduated high school many moons ago. And then I decided to come to US. I've always wanted to be an architect. When I got here, I needed a job quick. So down the street from where I lived, I there was a daycare center. So I started working there, and they knew I wanted to go to school. So they said, if you take child development courses, we will pay for it. So I said, okay. So I took a lot of courses, and I studied child development and family relationships. And a few years later, I decided, at the time I was living in Austin. So I decided that I wanted to move to California. I have no idea why, but so I transferred the job that I had, which helped a lot. And I moved to the Bay Area, and I started studying architecture there. I went to a community college, then got accepted at CU Boulder, did an environmental design bachelor degree, and then a master's of architecture. While I was doing my master's of architecture, I was looking at my friends who were taking classes in urban planning. And that just seemed very interesting to me, because in architecture, we have these classes that are 6 credits, and you meet with a professor 3 times a week for 4 to 5 hours a day. Those are called design studios. And in those design studios, the professor usually gives the students a topic, design a hospital, design a school for elementary children, elementary school age. And then you work through the design problem, and then you come up with a solution. What I learned was that the urban planning students would go out there and talk to the public and try to solve a problem that was existing, and that was very intriguing to me. So I started taking some urban planning classes just to kind of learn how they do what they do. And one day my advisor called me in to ask why I'm taking all these urban planning classes. And so I told her, and then she said, well, if you take planning law, you can get a master's degree in urban planning as well. Do you want to do that? I said, yeah, sure. Why not? So I have a master's degree in urban planning and a master's degree in architecture. For my master's in architecture, I really wanted to do a thesis because of, I think a little bit, at the time I wasn't sure why, but I think because of the urban planning classes that I was taking, I was very interested in this kind of client designer relationship. And I wanted to understand that better. It was a little bit hard to get that approved, but the dean at the time was wonderful, and he approved it because architecture students in the master's always do a thesis. So I started kind of my research, and I was looking for a topic. And as a child, I grew up around my great grandparents in Iran who were in their 70s when I was born, and they lived to be over 100. Um, and I had seen their interaction with their built environment because they lived on the second floor of an apartment, and they didn't have an elevator, and they refused to put one in. They didn't want to live anywhere else because that was their home. And every time I remember my mom would bring my great grandma home, she would stay a couple of days and then she would say she needs to go back home, because the kids might come and visit. But we were the kids, but she just wanted to be home. And that interaction impacted me a lot. So in talking to one of my professors about my search for a topic that I wanted to do research on, he said, "Well, you always talk about your grandparents, and I know you like schools because you work with children. So have you heard about intergenerational programs?" And that was the ignition. I guess that was the start. That was the sparkle of everything. It just made so much sense to me that I did my master's thesis for that. And because of that, I got a job in DC in an architectural firm. So I moved up there, and then I presented my master's thesis at Generations United conference. That Generations United is a nonprofit organization in DC that focuses on intergenerational program around the country. And there I met Dr. Shannon Jarrett, who at the time was a professor of gerontology at Virginia Tech. And she encouraged me to go and get my PhD. And I was living in DC, being young and happy, and experiencing a city that was very much like Tehran at the time. And but eventually I decided to do it. I went and got my PhD in architecture, and I continued my research on designing for intergenerational centers. So I took a lot of courses in the gerontology department because that was something that I wasn't very familiar with academically. And yeah, so that has become my baby in a sense, focusing on intergenerational design. But along the way, I've also, as a professor, I've learned, okay, so there are other difficulties that need to be considered when designing both for children and older adults, like Alzheimer, and those are also some of the topics that I look at.
So, I mean, that's just such a great story. I mean, because I'm a grandparent, and and I want to be around my grandchildren for a variety of reasons, to help guide them and get support from them, and in more traditional cultures, living traditionally, usually parents live in the household sometimes or very nearby. So your parents didn't live in the same house, but they lived close by, or was it when you?
This close by, yeah, we were. So my grandparents on both sides were in different cities. So my mom's parents and my dad's parents were in different cities, but for some reason my mom's grandparents were also in Tehran. So and to the day they died, and even today, I mean, I still have their phone numbers saved in my phone. And my sister, who's much younger, often asks me, like, why do you have their number? It's just that connection was something that was very meaningful to me. And
your great grandparents,
great
right?
grandparents, yes, great grandparents, yeah.
And you hear that a lot. And a lot of successful people, sometimes they'll say their grandfather or whatever grandmother had this profound influence on them. And I have this picture in my mind. I studied the Okinawan centenarians a lot, and there's this one. It might have been and the blue zones. And there's this one picture of this elderly, probably great grandmother, sitting there with a baby in her arms, and she's got to be 80 or 90, and she says, "Heaven on earth." That's all she says. And so that connection. So I get it. You have the perfect background to do what you do. If you were just an architect, I couldn't figure out if you were more from just an architecture, you need to like know how to plan and put this in a city structure and make it work, versus I look at the health aspects, and then like I went around my grandchildren, they challenge me on things, and it's good for me. And I believe there's an energy that goes back and forth. that helps both parties. So that's a great background. Super. So what let's just stay with the people for a moment. What benefits the elderly if youth are there? What benefits them?
Honestly, I think it's just like you said, the energy is the most important thing. But being able, what I've noticed, especially volunteering in some senior housing, is that kind of like sense of loneliness or not being in the community or in the society as much, or not being able to contribute as much. Right? That seems to happen to some people as they get older. But being around children and being able to share their stories and their experiences and their knowledge, that's definitely beneficial. A lot of times, and that's not necessarily older people, but like I might just be comfortable sitting around on my computer and working. But when my godson is around, I have to walk around and I have to make sure he's safe and I have to play with him and throw a ball and right. So it's just that physical activity that is encouraged and we're happier to do when we're with children than we are sometimes on our own. Um, and yeah, so a lot of sometimes, like when I was talking about autism, sometimes it helps with cognitive functions when being around children and doing activities that they would like. So kind of helps older adults remember their own childhood or their own experiences, and just yeah, overall self-esteem. I think it's that those are some of the main ones.
What would you say are some benefits of the children for the children
Oh,
being
well,
around on the other aspect?
yeah, as a person who has experienced that, I think for me at least, I know the love was just nothing like nothing else. And I've been very fortunate with having a wonderful family. Um, I grew up with great parents. I have very good relationships still with my siblings and my parents. And but that was something else. That was something that I don't think everybody unfortunately gets to experience. And it was just this pure giving. I feel like parents have expectations, right? I'm not a parent, but you are. So it was like, okay, so they love you unconditionally, obviously, but there are certain things they want you to achieve. That wasn't the deal with great grandparents. It was just loving you and whatever you need. So that was wonderful. But I think academically, maybe, so like for children, learning about those. The past just from somebody who has actually experienced it, right? That the art of storytelling is not as beautiful or is not as present as it was before. And I think through that relationship with older adults, whether it's blood related or not, right, that children can get that. It's been proven that social and emotional skills are a lot stronger in children who who interact with older adults. Um, l- just learning skills, like I never liked history. I was never good at it. I don't remember it. But the stories that my great grandparents told me, I don't think I will ever forget. Those are the things that I definitely remember, whether good or bad. Right? It's part of their life and part of the things that they've experienced. Um, and also just learning empathy, um, and and understanding different abilities. I think that's also very important for children, especially in today's world, where sometimes they're very isolated, right? Our children tend to go to daycare and come home, have specific play groups, right? So just they're very specific group. We're not as when I was growing up, we would go out in the street and play. Um, that's not a possibility anymore. So having these different interactions with people at different ages would allow them to kind of understand that better.
I have to ask you one thing about your great grandparents before I forget. Was there a favorite dish or meal that your great grandmother made, or that would light you up?
Honestly, I think anything she made was wonderful. One of my favorite stories about mealtime is that she always, without a doubt, every single time would put the best piece of meat for my great grandfather, and then he would put it in my plate. That was just kind of like the thing that always happened. Um, There is a dish that is actually with eggplant and lamb, and we eat it over rice. And that was my favorite, one of my favorite dishes that she made.
Right. Was mealtime with them special, or was it?
It was. It really. I think honestly, I think anything with them was special. It from the time like I would get to their house, and I was a teenager, so there were certain things I would wear, like tight jeans. It was a fashion then, right? Really tight that you needed someone's help to take them off. And the minute I would get there, my great grandfather would go and bring one of his own pants because they're like loose and comfortable, and he's like, "Take that thing off. Let's just be
That,
comfortable."
it sounds like me.
Yeah.
That's great.
So it was like a scrub, literally. It was like the pants that he would wear around the house were like scrubs, and he would want me to wear that, and I always did because that's what he wanted, and just he was one of the best men that I have ever known in my life.
Well, what a compliment. He's saying he's beaming wherever he is. Well, to me, you have the perfect background then. You have the background of the family, you have the background of generational family, you have the background of working in a daycare center. I mean, just out of the blue. And then you go on to study the structure. So you're the perfect person to try and put it together in the real world. And one of my questions was, are you trying to do it for like uh, city municipalities or a city government, or are you trying to do it like a private business would come and say we want to build these things? So obviously you're the architect. Which one is more, I don't know, happening right now?
I would love it if a city comes and says, this is what we want to do. And that's one of the things that we're slowly trying to get happening here in San Antonio. Um, I have so far, so my day job, right, is a professor, but I've gotten phone calls like random, similar to um, our introduction together, is like somebody has read an article and had called me and said, okay, we're working on an intergenerational center and we need a consultant. So I've done a few of those, but nothing major for a city yet, which I really hope it will happen. I think our cities need it. I think every city needs at least, depending on the site, at least one intergenerational center that is truly designed for intergenerational activities. We have a lot of childcare centers that are nearby a senior home, or vice versa, right? Schools, elementary schools, middle schools that bring their children to an older community center, or so then people can interact. But those are what I really call planned activities, and in a way sometimes forced activities. But I think having a building or a campus designed specifically for intergenerational interaction makes a major difference in terms of making these happen organically.
Do you think that private business or companies do it because they see a need, not so much for the health aspects, but they see a need to take care of kids, and I mean take for daycare centers and for the elderly, and so they're thinking of it from, well, a business aspect, I guess, first, versus I'm thinking about it like how great it would be and all the things we talked about. But do you think that's what's happening, that they see, wow, there's a business opportunity here in a good way, um, and they're exploring that?
I think so, but because uh, really, for in terms of like organizational benefit, there are a lot of major benefits in cost saving, which we know money is important, especially when you're running a business. So that's definitely one of the main points. But I think at least the ones that I have worked with are the ones that have seen the benefit for uh, children and older adults both. So in one case, it was a community center that was really serving teenagers only. And then they noticed that there was a park nearby, that older adults were there sometimes. And so they decided that, oh, what if we create an environment that older adults and teenagers could be together? Um, so they had already seen some of the interactions, and they have already seen some of the benefits. And then the other one was the same thing. There was a child care center and then an older adult care center nearby, and they were already having the interaction. But they had decided, since the buildings were close enough that they could just come together at any time. There was a park nearby, so they decided that they wanted to just remodel both buildings and connect them. So I think it's a little bit of both, at least with the ones that I have worked with.
So tell me some intergenerational activities. That was an interesting term, monogenerational activities and intergenerational activities. I think I know what mono is, but tell me some of the 4 or 5 intergenerational activities that would be in these facilities.
So the way I've experienced them, and the reason I started, after my master's, I decided to just kind of like still continue the research for my PhD, was that there are existing facilities like that in the country, right? So, and for my master's program, I was lucky that I got a little bit of funding and I was able to go and visit a few of them. And some of them work greatly. Others, they can be better. And the way it works is that, so they have a child care center and then they have an adult care center. And one of the caregivers from the adult care center, let's say at 10 a.m. every day after breakfast, brings 3 of the older adults, and then one of the child care givers bring 3 of the children, and they go in one room and they do an activity. That activity could be, let's color together, right? Or let's do what I think they call a ball parachute, when there's like a large parachute and everybody holds a corner and they're just kind of throw a ball in, and the goal is not to let the ball fall, right? And they're fun. Some adults enjoy it, some not so much. When I worked at an intergenerational center myself, I noticed some of the older adults, especially the baby boomers, right there. I would ask them, so like, Mr. So-and-so, would you like to go see the children? And they would always say yes. And I love children, but I still don't want to see them all the time, right? So like and that was a little bit alarming to me that they would always say yes. So I started asking one of them that I got really close with, and I said, is it ever a time that you don't want to see children? And then he said, yeah, sometimes they're too loud, but I was raised not to make waves. And then I noticed that a lot more with others, that if I would ask them, it's okay if you don't want to, but do you want to? And they would say, no, not if I don't have to. So that really got me into this. Okay, so like maybe these activities, and most of the time the activities are toward the children when they're planned. And it wasn't something that the older adults had the choice of doing or not. So what we did in there was that I started asking the older adults, because these were all retired, right? And they would come in for the day center. They spend their day there because for one reason or another, they couldn't be at home alone. One of them was an engineer. The other one was a chef. One of them used to sing in choir at the church. So I started planning activities with them. So it was something that they would then go to the childcare center. So, the scientist or the science teacher would plan these activities. He and I would do it together, and then we would go to the childcare center, and then he would teach the children about the science activities. Same things with the chef, right? So we would do a lot of cooking together, but he would plan the meal. He would cook it with the children, and then they would serve it to everybody else. So it really depends. And some of those would kind of go back to that sharing your experience and sharing the older adults' knowledge with children. So those are some of the code-to-code planned activities.
Right. So part of the activities come from the skills of the elderly in the past or their profession.
Yes.
So now let's go to the other side. What do the children, and I don't know what the age range is, but what do the children think? Do they say, hey, we want to go see the older folks today? Or they go, oh my gosh, I got to go hang out with the older folks. What motivates them or to do that?
That's a wonderful question, actually. So I've done a lot of interviews with children to kind of understand if they like to do it or not. And one of the things that I've learned is the exact same thing. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But it is a lot easier for a 4-year-old to cry and say, I don't want to go, than it is for a 74-year-old to do that, right? Children just say no, because they're not that conditioned with the society, or they haven't learned that saying no might not be okay or might be impolite. They just say what they want to say. But also, as I'm sure you know, we as adults think that we can tell children what they do because we know better, right? And so that's something that I think with design, that's one of the main things that I'm focusing on, is that how do we design that we would allow children and older adults to choose, like truly choose if they want to interact in an activity, and at what level they want to interact, and which activity and for how long, right? So because if I have planned an intergenerational activity between older adults and children, whether it's a child focus or older adults focus, I would say we're going to meet at 10 a.m. in this place. This is what we're going to do for 30 minutes, and then everybody would go their way. What if an older adult and a child really bond and they want to continue sitting together and reading, or just singing, right? So we've really looked at different environments that we could design that would allow different levels of interaction and different types of interaction. And with that, it includes, like, a lot of children, especially at the beginning, have that stranger danger kind of awareness that we teach our children. And they don't want to interact with someone they have never met before, right? Or they've seen around a couple of times. So we design buildings in a way that would allow children to see older adults, for example, being on their daily walk. So we have a walkway around the child care center that older adults can take their daily walk. And this allows children, especially younger ones, to see them, maybe wave at them through the window. There was a center that I visited that had a balcony where children could go to, or older adults would come outside and sit, and that balcony overlooked children's playground. So again, like a little bit more of an intimate interaction where children could reach over and hold someone's hand or talk to them. And then if you want to bring them together, or if the older adults or the children would decide that, oh, I want to go see Miss Smith because, I have seen her through the window now and I really want to go see her. Generally, I think, in my experience, at least mostly, children really enjoyed it because they get that one-on-one attention that you don't necessarily, when I worked in a daycare, I love children. I absolutely adore them, especially under 5, because they're still growing and there's just so much change every day and every month. And um, but there was 2 of us, 2 teachers and 12 children. So it doesn't matter how much I love them. I just cannot hold 6 children at the same time, right? So you don't get that one-on-one attention anytime that you need, especially if 3 children start crying together or need your attention at the same time. But going and visiting the older adults would give them that one-on-one attention, right? So that's sometimes that would be something that children like to go toward.
So these individuals would be the parents would bring the children in every day. It's not a residential facility that you're living in, right? And then the elderly would get, I don't know. I mean, if they come in via their own cars, or they come in via a shuttle bus that picks them up, how does that work?
So generally, there is a child care center where children are dropped off, and like any other daycare that we could take our children to, but it's attached to, or on the same campus as an older adult community. And some of those communities have only day centers. So there's just one building that's a day center where people can bring their parents or their spouses to drop them off for the day. Or they actually have an older adult living community where there's like independent living, assisted living, and skilled nursing. So there are different levels, but older adults are generally, in those scenarios, older adults reside on the campus, and then children are there for the day.
Okay, that makes sense. So, lastly, I mean, you're the perfect person to design these things. I mean, for me, because you've done it all. You've got every aspect covered, and you love children, and you've had the experiences, and you've got the knowledge of how to put stuff together. So, one of the things would be safety for the children. That's the first thing that pops up in my mind, and I'm sure it pops up in your mind. And if I was a parent going to drop off, I go, okay. One thing of being being around a couple of aides, in the daycare center. Now, is there supervision when the young, however old they are visiting the elderly people?
100%, always. Yeah, there are always supervision. But there are, anytime a child is interacting with an older adult, there is required for a child care provider to be there. So generally, for example, if there is a community center where older adults are living there and children want to go visit, a teacher would take 3, 4 children who are willing to go, and they would go to the older adult section to visit them. And usually there are also caregivers on the older adult section that are present, just to make sure everyone's safe and everyone's happy. And it happens like in places that are spaces that are specifically designed for intergenerational interactions. Or there's a center in Houston, Kansas that has a kind of an indoor street designed between the two center, and in that indoor street there's a ice cream store and a gift shop, and like a bank kind of, and there are tables, and then there's an opening to the outdoor courtyard. So sometimes children and older adults meet there.
Okay, so I don't want to put words in your mouth. Most of the time, the elderly are residents at the facility, and the children are dropped off at a daycare setting around them or connected, right?
Yes.
So, um, I mean, you've said it all. I mean, again, you sound like the perfect person to do this.
Thank you.
You're not on one side or the other. You're not just a pure architect saying somebody coming to you and say, "Hey, I want to put this thing together." You have personal history. You worked in a daycare center, and then you have all the traditional training of architecture. So, any closing thoughts that you want to say?
Um, I think my hope and dream is to have this become just a center that exists everywhere. Honestly, it's just something that anywhere that I've lived, I kind of had to fight for and encourage it, and I've not always been successful, but I really hope it just makes so much sense to me that I don't know why we would design only one or the other. Um, so yeah, I think I would leave it with that.
Yeah, well, that brought up one last question. If we were a culture, like maybe in the day of your great grandparents, would that be needed? Because traditional cultures generally have family more together. So it says something about our society that we live apart. But in a perfect world, even though you design this perfect intergenerational thing and it's safe and it's good for both people, in your heart, would you say it'd be better if we could have family units closer together,
It's
like the olden days?
100%. Again, as a person who grew up with family and still are very close to them, I don't think anything would replace that. But I've worked 20 years before I was able to bring my parents and my siblings to the US. It took me 20 years to bring everyone here. And in that 20 years, I went back to Iran every single year. But I have not even once since, my great grandparents passed away and everyone in my family moved here. Um, so that happens. We move away. The world seems to be a lot smaller than it was 50 years ago, right? People travel a lot more and move to different countries and different continents. So because of that, I think, and when we have a lot more of that possibility here in the US, that even if I'm not, so even when my parents moved, they moved to Austin, and my siblings too, which is why I came back to Texas. At the time I was living in Virginia. But, even between Virginia and Texas, I wasn't able to come in for Father's Day and Mother's Day, or Christmas and Nowruz, which is Persian New Year, right? I had to choose between my holidays and birthdays. But now I don't have to do that because I live in the same state, at least. But being in the same country and even different states, it's hard to always do that. And children, might not get that interaction, even if their families are close. But mom and dad had to move to a different state, to a different city for work. So having these intergenerational centers would allow for non-familial interactions, but still kind of the benefit of understanding older adults for children, and then for older adults to be still connected to the younger community, even if their own grandparents or grandchildren are not nearby.
Well, I'll close by saying if I was going to invest and build the place, an intergenerational day center, you'd be the person to be the chief person, because again, you have every level of the experience, the family experience, multi-generational. I love the great grandparents. I hope I make it that far. Um, and I hope that my great grandchildren have an experience like you. But you have that, you have the education, you worked in it, and you worked in a daycare center, which I think is tremendously valuable. So you can put it together. And so I wish you the best of luck and success, because it can only help us as a
Thank
society with people like you, you
thank
know. So I'm going to close. I want to thank the audience for listening to this edition of the Staying Healthy Today show, and I'll have Dr. Norouzi's article below, and we'll be in touch.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.